I'd never spoken to Mike or Rick about this in the years since. Not that I have much contact with them nowadays, but even if I did, I don't think we would speak about it. And I've only recently told close friends. My wife only found out about this maybe 2 years ago. And I think it's time to share the story now because it's sat with me for so long. Just who this guy was. It's not the scariest of stories, but it's definitely one of the strangest, I think.
Welcome back to Hey That's Weird, the paranormal storytelling podcast that provides you a space to tell your story in your own words. Big thanks this week to everyone who commented, reviewed, or shared their support of episode 13. I'm really happy so many of you seem to connect with Jonathan and his story. Also, a big thank you to Steph TLM for going the extra mile and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. That kind of thing really helps. Also, this week, Hey That's Weird hit 50,000 all-time plays and 2,000 subscribers on Spotify. That's around 1,950 people more than I ever expected to be interested in this thing. So again, thank you. I'll keep making episodes as long as you guys keep listening. This week's storyteller is Jay from East Anglia in the UK. Jay's story is a little different. It's not your typical Hey That's Weird ghost story, more of an encounter with a strange individual. Jay's story gripped me from the start to the finish, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, Jay, without further ado, let's get weird.
My name is Jay and I'm from East Anglia in the UK. This happened to me in 2002, maybe 2003. It was post the events of September 11th, 2001 and prior to the invasion of Iraq, which will play a part later. As a teen, I would hang around my local city centre with friends, not doing much other than loitering and getting in the way of ordinary folk going about their business. On this particular day, we were walking down a busy street that branched off of the main high street. I was accompanied by two friends and we were heading home for the evening. The shops in the city were starting to close. Other friends had headed off in different directions and we decided that we would end our unproductive yet enjoyable day and also head home. One of the friends I was with was somewhat of a loudmouth, I guess you could describe him as. A bit of an attention seeker, meaning that he could be a handful at times. And as we walked, this friend, who we'll call Mike for privacy's sake, began yelling various antagonistic and what he considered edgy statements for passers-by to hear and tut at. This was largely embarrassing for me. I'm typically quiet, and my other friend, who was also with us, didn't welcome the attention now coming our way from the public. So we tried to calm Mike down. We had little success with that, so we let him walk a little ahead of us in a vain attempt to distance ourselves from what was unfolding and what he was up to. As he was a little bit ahead of us, I remember he shouted something along the lines of, "Government is just another word for better than you." He was never going to be a politician or a revolutionary figure with wordplay like that, but it seemed appropriate to him at the time and he yelled it at the top of his voice. As those words left his mouth, it was like they triggered something on that street, like everything went into slow motion. People on the street seemed to glide past us and everything closed in around me. I can only assume, looking back, that was embarrassment and anxiety kicking in. And in this slow motion, a man who looked no less ordinary than anybody else on the street passed by Mike, walking in the opposite direction. At the very second he shouted and the words registered with this ordinary man, he spun his head, stopped dead in his tracks, and just glared at Mike, who was none the wiser he'd passed him by at this point, no doubt thinking up another gold standard political statement to yell. This man was maybe 5 feet from me and my other friend, who we'll name Rick. We noticed that he had taken an interest in Mike. We assumed the telling off was heading our way, shouting in the street. In hindsight, a telling off would probably be a better outcome than what actually went down. The man, as I said, had stopped dead in his tracks and watched Mike walk past. He shot a glance at me and Rick, and due to the way we were dressed, black hoodie, ripped jeans, wallet chains, he did simple maths in his head and worked out that we were together. So as we drew level with this man, he stopped us and asked us to call Mike back. Again, like I said, we expected a dressing down to be coming away, so we obliged and we called Mike back. He reluctantly returned to us, a bit amused, and joined us alongside this stranger. I can remember the man clearly in my head, even though this was 20 years or so ago. If I saw him in the street today, I'll be able to pick him out. He had grey jeans, tan shoes, and a brown leather jacket, which was done up. He had glasses, and I've always described him or thought of him as looking academic. His hair was receding at the front, that had length at the back, which reached his shoulders, and over one shoulder he had a brown leather satchel that almost matched his jacket. So we stood there for a moment in awkward silence, waiting for this man to lecture Mike, but he didn't. Instead, he began asking us questions. How he phrased those questions, I can't exactly remember, but they were something to the point of,
who do you think has power in the world? Who has control? Who pulls the strings?
And we said, well, it's governments. I mean, we were teenagers. And he kind of smirked at that. And then he said,
do you believe in God? Do you follow any religion?
And we said, no. And he seemed pleased that we'd taken the time to answer his questions and hadn't just given him some verbal abuse and moved on. He seemed satisfied that we'd been receptive to him and that we'd given him answers to his questions. Then he asked if we'd like to take a walk with him, and we agreed. Now, in today's day and age, this sounds a bit strange, but this was 20 years ago. I was a teenager, very little life experience. We were naive and very curious, so we went with this man. We agreed to take a walk with him. I can't remember if we had a conversation while we walked or not, but I imagine we did, because I don't think we walked in silence. But what we spoke about, I just cannot recall. It's as if it's just blocked out of my memory. If we spoke amongst ourselves or if we spoke to this man, we just followed him 5 minutes down the road to the cathedral that sits in the centre of the city. We took a quiet spot near the back. Again, I know how that sounds, but there's a small footpath through there. The odd dog walker or commuter coming through. It's very quiet around the back there. So he took us around there and he opened up his satchel and he started rummaging through, and he told us he wanted to show us something and that he wanted to talk to us about it. The strange thing is he seemed rushed, but he wasn't flustered with it. It's like he knew exactly how many seconds he had to spare and was sort of counting them down in his head. It's a hard detail to explain, but he was very aware of how much time he had without constantly checking his watch. So from his bag he pulled out a collection of notebooks. I believe one was blue, one was green, and one was brown. I think they had leather covers. He knelt down, and we sort of crouched down as well, and he started to rifle through his books. He opened them up, spun them around so we could see their contents, and what was inside was the most intricate and detailed drawings I think I've ever seen in my life to this day, all laid down in blue ink on graph paper. The illustrations that stick in my mind the most, that have remained over the years, were anatomically correct humans, similar to medical sketches, and they were standing within these large semicircular gateways, I guess is a good way to put it, like a tunnel entrance on a platform. Some of them were stood with their arms down by the side, and some of them were stood with their arms out in a T-like position, and their fingertips very nearly touched the frame of this gateway, or this device that they were stood in. As he flicked through, there were other drawings that looked a bit like, well, they reminded me of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. The way the anatomy was perfectly represented, it was clearly done with expertise and skill. It wasn't just a doodle, it wasn't someone just showing us their art book. There was a level of incredible detail and intelligence to these drawings. They were more like technical blueprints for things. It seemed that the humans standing within these semicircle gates or these entrances were drawn for scale, so you could see the scale of the device compared to the average human. But all around them on the page were tiny, indecipherable notes in really, really small handwriting. There was mathematical equations, there was all kinds of... The pages were filled from corner to corner in blue ink with just the most insane amount of detail for whatever these things were that he was drawing. I guess if you need to imagine it in your mind, it looked like the Omega symbol in uppercase. That sort of looked like a sort of almost half circle, semicircle on a platform. Then the really strange thing happens. As he's flicking through these pages, he asks us,
Do you know what a Stargate is?
so obviously we mentioned the TV show, the same name, but he said,
No, the real ones.
like it was the most natural and everyday thing. And as he said, no, the real ones, he tapped his fingers on the drawing of these gateways. Okay, so essentially what a Stargate is it's a theoretical scientific device that can link two places across time and space, and it can allow you to travel across interstellar distances by sort of stepping through this portal. And they also theoretically been rumored to be able to take you to other dimensions. It's utter science fiction. I don't think there's any real science to back up that they're possible. Maybe an Einstein-Rosen bridge would be the closest thing we could think of, but it's essentially that captured in a device. You could step through, and wherever you want to go, you could step through from your living room to Mars if you wanted, something like that. We looked at him puzzled, probably let out a little laugh, but he remained so stoic and so deadly serious. He was so convinced of what he was telling us. And he flicked through more pages and showed us diagram upon diagram of every single component of a Stargate, from nuts, bolts, wiring, circuitry, everything broken down piece by piece. It was sort of a technical manual on how to assemble what he believed and what he told us to be an actual Stargate. These books were clearly manuals. Whether he created them or not, it's hard to say, but I've always assumed that he did, just because of how well he knew them and the way he spoke about them. I've always assumed he was the author. At this point, we thought, this guy's nuts, or he's a major science fiction fan with far too much time on his hands. But like I said, he was so relaxed and so utterly convinced. He gave no hint whatsoever that he was winding us up or wasting our time, simply because he didn't like Mike's actions in the street earlier. He remained immovable in his conviction that he was letting us in on a secret, that he knew how to build a Stargate. And it seemed really important to him that we understood and believed him when he told us this. Now, I don't recall him mentioning if he'd already built one or if he was in the process of building one, but he spoke about everything in such a matter-of-fact way that we could tell his intentions were imminent either way. He talked about all the complicated maths that would be involved with this undertaking and all the complicated science that went along with it, and that we wouldn't understand it, and he was right. And he told us that he knew how to build what he called wonderful things. To our amazement, he said he could prove that before diving back into his satchel. This time he pulled out what looked to resemble a lightsaber, which sounds crazy, but it's the closest thing I can think of that it looked like, the sort of hilt of a lightsaber from Star Wars. He asked us if we knew what this device was, and he held it out in his hands to show us, and we said rather sheepishly, it's a lightsaber. He seemed to find this funny, that we thought he could have a real-life lightsaber despite him just showing us a technical manual on how to build a Stargate. So he grabbed another notebook and showed us another drawing, but with this one, he plunged into the bag, he pulls the book out, and he knows exactly what page. Without even looking, he just splits the book with his fingers, and boom, there's another technical drawing, blue ink, graph paper, and it's the device that he's holding in his hand. In the same obsessive detail, there's equations, there's notes all over this thing, and it looks exactly like a technical blueprint. Now, if it was a movie prop, it would be Hollywood level, and I've spent hours and hours looking into props from Stargate, the TV series, the movies, anything to do with that, prototype stuff that was designed for Star Wars. I've gone down rabbit holes looking for something that resembles this device in his hand, and I found absolutely nothing. So picture in your mind a lightsaber from Star Wars without the laser part, just the hilt. It looked like that, but it was split down the middle by about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. He didn't allow us to touch it, but he showed us inside you could see tiny, really intricate wiring and these really small brass or copper tubes that intersected with each other and were connected to the normal looking circuitry. It's like nothing I've ever seen before or since. Makes absolutely no sense. Bridging these two small slits in this device was a metal buckle with a black button on it. push button, and that looked like it had been well worn. The plastic was sort of wearing away. He said this device could change the world. He wouldn't tell us what it was. He just said,
"This device has the potential to change the world."
We pushed him further, and he said we weren't ready to understand what it was yet, but it was important that we saw it, and it was important that we knew it existed, whatever it was. I remember Mike asked if he could hold it, and the guy got very serious, even more serious than he had been. He got very, very matter-of-fact that absolutely not. Nobody, even in its current deactivated state, under no circumstances could anyone but him ever handle this device. We could look at it and that was it. He was very, very protective of it, very, very cautious with it. So as we're trying to get our head around everything that's happened and everything he's told us and just how strange this whole scenario was, he looks up at the sky and then rather abruptly just his demeanour changes. He grabs all his notebooks, he takes the strange device and he packs it all back in his satchel, checks his watch, slings his bag over his shoulder, looks like he's ready to leave. He tells us he needs to go.
I have an incredibly important decision to make before day's end.
And I remember I asked him what that decision was, and he gave a sort of smug smile and said,
"What's the biggest news story right now?"
So we thought for a second and answered that it had to be the potential invasion of Iraq, as I alluded to at the beginning. At this time, the world was waiting for confirmation that coalition forces were going to greenlight their invasion plans following the 9/11 attacks. And it was Mike who finally answered and said the potential invasion of Iraq. And now this guy nods slowly and the smile fades from his face. He tells us flatly that it was up to him what to do. Now he made it very clear, just like everything else, utterly convinced that it was his sole decision whether to go to war or not. And he said he had to get this decision right. There was no room for error. Whatever he decided to do had to be the correct course of action. And it was solely on his shoulders, this decision. Years later, I would discover that there's a wild and very, very speculative conspiracy theory that there's a Stargate hidden somewhere in Iraq underground. And one of the reasons for the invasion was to capture this device. Now, of course, there's little to no evidence to back this story up, and it's more likely just an internet myth. I don't believe it personally, but it doesn't make it any less creepy, given this encounter that he was talking about Stargates, that he had intimate knowledge of Stargates and how to build them, and it was his sole decision whether to enter Iraq under the guise of war or not. So after he mentioned this potential invasion in his decision, he checked his watch again and said,
"Whatever I choose will change the world forever. I must choose correctly."
Before we could ask him anything else, he just said,
"One last thing. Never speak of this meeting. Don't even discuss it amongst yourselves."
We agreed, and he just turned and left, strode back off in the direction he'd come from, never looked back. We were utterly confused, a little bit creeped out for the rest of the day, and decided not to talk about it, just as instructed. We walked back to the bus centre to go our separate ways, and we did mention it as if it never happened. I'd never spoken to Mike or Rick about this in the years since. Not that I have much contact with them nowadays, but even if I did, I don't think we would speak about it. And I've only recently told close friends. My wife only found out about this maybe 2 years ago. And I think it's time to share the story now because it's sat with me for so long. Just who this guy was. It's not the scariest of stories, but it's definitely one of the strangest, I think. I think it spooked me deep down, which is why I didn't speak about it for close to 20 years. Is this just some really intelligent sci-fi fan with too much time on his hands who liked to mess with kids at least half his age? If so, why? What did he gain from this? Was he a movie prop guy on a random street in East Anglia? Probably not. That would explain the detail of his notebooks maybe, but he didn't elaborate on anything. He was very cryptic. He framed everything as a question. The whole conversation was just him asking us questions, and when we would answer them, he'd come back with another question. He never showed us too much. We weren't allowed to peek behind the curtain, so to speak, and see too much. Everything was at arm's length. I'm a very logical person, so I always tried to look for the most rational answer, but there doesn't seem to be a rational answer other than this guy was crazy. But if he was crazy, he doesn't explain what the device was. You might be able to explain the books away as some eccentric artist or some obsessive sci-fi fan, but the device with the copper tubes and the strange circuitry, and it didn't look like anything I've ever seen before other than something out of a science fiction film. But why would it be so intricate inside if it was just a movie prop? And why did he stop us? I believe if Mike hadn't been shouting in the street, he would have walked straight past us just like everybody else, and we would have never had this encounter. Maybe he would have stopped someone else. Maybe he would have gone about his business.
This is my kind of story. I told Jay I wouldn't have been able to rest until I had tracked down this guy and figured out exactly who he was. I can't believe he went 20 years without doing so. So what was Jay's conclusion? Who was the mystery man? Here's what he had to say.
When my rational brain says he's just a weird guy who took advantage of a cocky kid shouting in the street, but if it wasn't for the device, the lightsaber as I call it, if it wasn't for that, I would have probably written it off as this guy's a weirdo. He's trying to mess with some kids, but it's the copper tubes intersecting with the circuitry. I don't know how else to explain it. I can see it in my mind, and I wish I could project that image out so people could see exactly what it looks like. I would never be able to draw it. I don't even think AI would be able to put it together if I told it to. It's just these two slits, circuitry, tiny wiring going all over the place, and then these copper tubes intersecting everything, wires wrapped around them, wires running under them, and then this metal buckle and a button that looked like it'd been pushed 1,000 times. It was heavy in his hands. He didn't let us hold it, but you could tell it was heavy the way he moved it, the way it rolled in his hands. It wasn't just a plastic toy. It wasn't something he knocked up in a workshop. It was a fully fledged thing. And that's the thing that itches my brain. What was that thing? Why did he take us to a quiet spot to show us whatever's in his notebooks? I wish I could have read them if I'd been able to sit and flick through them, but it just wasn't possible. I mean, we were more baffled by what was happening than anything else.
Secondly, I asked Jay if he was worried about sharing his story after all this time, after being specifically warned not to by the strange man.
I was the first time. I mean, I held the story for 20 years, and the first people I told were my two close friends in a pub after a couple of beers. I think we got on the subject of woo-woo, strange stuff, and it just popped into my head. I was like, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's get it out there. Let's see what people think, because it sat with me for so long. I don't really speak to the other guys anymore, so I don't know if they remember it or what they think of it or if they've told anybody. And I told them, and they found it fascinating. One of them then made me retell his girlfriend. I then told my wife. Sometimes it creeps me out thinking that I've now broken that bowl of silence, but so far nothing's happened. No spaceman has turned up, no stargates opened up outside my house. He was adamant that we don't tell anyone, and we don't even speak about it amongst ourselves. I can't remember his exact words, but I know he was very, very serious about, don't talk about this, not even amongst yourselves. This never happened. And then he just walked off. He wasn't a threat. I know it sounds strange taking young lads behind a cathedral, but there wasn't that vibe even back then that anything like that was going on. He was adamant he wanted to talk to us about what he had in his notebooks and in his back.
As usual, on Hey That's Weird, I reserve a section of the show for my storytellers to plug or promote something they're passionate about. Here's what Jay wanted to share.
I'd like to promote Andy's Man's Club. It's a UK-based men's mental health charity that offers free peer-to-peer support groups in person and online, and they work to end the stigma around men's mental health. You can find out more at andysmansclub.co.uk.
And that does it for episode 14. Big thanks to Jay for sharing his story, and an extra huge thanks to my Canadian friend Dan for stepping up and providing his voice acting talents for this episode. I asked him last minute to record a bunch of lines in an English accent, and he absolutely nailed it. Thanks, Dan. If you want to make an episode with me, reach out with your story. You can submit it on Instagram at HeyThat'sWeirdPodcast, or via email at heythat'sweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again so much for taking the time to listen this far. You guys are the reason I make this show. Until next time, stay weird.